Cool. Okay, thanks Ed for the opportunity to present the state of Earth observation at GeoMob. I realise in 15 minutes I can't really do justice to this title, so I'm going to do my best. I think in the last 10 years or so, Earth observation has changed just so drastically. We've had cheaper to launch satellites, improved compute, reduction in storage costs. Combine that with more accessible modeling, including the boom of deep learning, align that with huge quantities of non-commercial satellite data being made freely available, such as the Landsat and Copernicus programs. It's given us a huge amount of very diverse satellite data. However, I think the public and people still perceive Earth observation equals Google Earth with its pretty high resolution data sets and our ability to spy on our neighbors. And that's why myself and Alistair, we started the Seen From Above podcast, which is sort of flagged here on our title slide, at the end of 2017 in an attempt really to sort of understand and communicate wider with this very diverse Earth observation community. Since starting, we've had about 50 episodes talking to various people, some of whom are present today. We've had almost 200,000 downloads, so it shows that there is a general interest in this sphere. And we've just had such an amazing time, and really we've just tried to hold on to the coattails, and we've witnessed new launches of satellites, new technology, new ideas, some fade, others not do so well. And I do really feel incredibly lucky to be able to sort of sit in this position as a freelancer, self-employed like Alistair, and we try and give an unbiased view of the state of Earth observation. But I freely admit we are completely biased. So I think satellite data has probably traditionally been seen in this sort of layer cake GIS, traditional, this is what you search for on Google and this is what you get back, a single base map that you plot some vector data on, and that's still being used a lot, I think, perhaps digitized roads or field parcels. But in 2020, and really for the last 5 years, we've just got too many pixels for humans to look at. And there is this ever increasing need to map, model, interpret, and derive information faster. When I look back on sort of 15 years or so, when I started looking at satellite data, we were racing to get one image. Sometimes you had to go and drive to get it. Sometimes it was delivered on DVDs, a whole stack of information. And at the time, we were just glad to get one image. We paid £750 for a Landsat tile. But today, one image isn't cool anymore. It's 10,000 images. This is what the research and work is going on. Not so much 10,000, but perhaps 100,000 images. And this huge volume of pixels to look at has led to a huge growth external to Earth observation, I think. And this has been driven by competitions like Kaggle and the SpaceNet competition, which is now in its 7th iteration. We're driving more information about the Earth's surface, and it's become a really sort of competitive world. And we've got to this point at this sort of juxtaposition where, do you want to be an Earth observation person learning about deep learning and processing, or are you going to become a deep learning person who needs to understand the science and the constructs of Earth observation and geospatial? So it's this kind of marriage that's trying to fit together. So why has this all happened? It's not just the technology and the storage. One of the biggest drivers is the fact that launches and the volume of satellites coming on the market now, they are cheaper to launch, they're smaller to launch. The world record of satellites launched was broken in 2017. So, I mean, to me, that only feels like 5 seconds ago, but over 3 years ago, Planet launched 88 satellites on a payload, an Indian payload, an astonishing amount of infrastructure being launched, giving us a huge volume of data, and they're mapping the Earth every day, in fact sub-day now. And it's not just Earth observation satellites that are being launched in huge volumes, it's communications satellites, so think OneWeb and Starlink, but also positioning satellites like GPSs and Galileos. So the market share for Earth observation is still pretty small compared to these other satellites. But I think that there's perhaps no dispute now that we have more Earth observation satellites, whether they be optical or radar or satellites specifically looking at weather from geostationary satellites or studying the atmosphere or the ocean. Each satellite now almost has its own sort of unique characteristic, whether it's daily or sub-daily revisits on a global scale or a small area but very high resolution. There's almost a satellite for everything now. And this trend, as we've seen on the podcast, continues to come on board with increasingly specialized launches. And this conveyor belt of satellite data and satellite launches has led to a huge volume of commercial business sort of setting up and starting up, a huge amount of VC money going in to support these companies. This is perhaps a little bit of a hazy slide, but do check out the Radiant Earth Foundation, who makes these infographics free and open for us all to use and look at. But we've got a lot of commercial entities and a lot of non-commercial entities on the right-hand side. And Earth observation has very traditionally been focused on a sort of business to governmental marketplace, and it increasingly wants to look towards a more business to business environment. But still in 2020, the majority of the work is in large governmental contracts and consulting. Things like price, understanding the user, selling a service, all these things that these companies on the left in the commercial world are trying to use as a differentiator to give us more value from the data. Whereas, and I'm always a little bit reluctant to say this, but perhaps on the non-commercial side, there's more interest in the scientific rigor and mapping the planet and understanding the planet like we've never had before to help everybody make better decisions. Often what gets lost in the new startup world is that we've just got to get the data, we've just got to get the information out of the data. The end user often gets forgotten in the sense that they don't just want to look at a pretty picture, they want to get their quick information, whether that be a CSV file or some other form of information, maybe just a point on a map. And it is perhaps the fusion of data that will become the larger differentiator in the future. So what are all these startups, and I'm a bit reluctant to say startups now, but what are all these sort of new players interested in? Well, one of the sort of dominant things that you perhaps have heard about of Earth observation, the optical market, is counting things. And counting things such as cars in supermarkets or in parking lots in the US especially, but also things like oil tanks and other analytics like tracking boats, for example. So you can go and check out this post, but other companies like Descartes Labs, Orbital Insight, who also count cars, and ICEYE are raising huge volumes of venture capital to support this idea of analytics from space. And this is the kind of the excitement of the industry, and it's been growing for the last few years. But traditionally speaking, Earth observation has been a mergers business where we've seen companies like GeoEye and Digital Globe merge over a large US contract. And that trend continues even with the smaller companies. And Planet aren't really a small company anymore, but they're acquiring new satellites like Terabella here, and also they acquired Boundless. So they're bringing into their sphere more ability to serve more customers. So this is the sort of state of play in satellite data. We haven't really seen too many exits, in inverted commas, of these players, but maybe it's something we will see in the future. I think after sort of hyping it up, I think it's really worth saying that and reiterating that it's perhaps not all plain sailing as you may have been led to believe. And Joe Morrison, it's always a bit embarrassing to name people, but Joe Morrison, who was in our last podcast, he writes some really excellent blogs, and this is a really, really good one to go and check out and follow. The link is in the slide if I'll make them available at the end. But he makes a ton of good points, and the one highlighted here is perhaps the most telling, which is that someone somewhere is making a ton of money from satellite imagery for something other than military intelligence. And this is the premise that a lot of companies are working on. He's also written a lot about marketplaces and why they perhaps aren't such a viable idea in the Earth observation sphere. So trying to balance it up. And the other thing I want to balance it up with is the public's perception of high resolution satellite data and the ethics surrounding privacy are something that we quite frequently don't discuss. And while this is the Daily Mail's online article and maybe quite sensational, and it is quite a balanced article for the Mail, you should read the comments. They're not so balanced, but they're telling us that our privacy has been invaded here, and it's something that we need to take seriously. This is an article way back from 2014 on WorldView 2 when it was launched. It was a 30 centimeter satellite that's still in service today. In fact, just this week, Maxar have announced that they're not acquiring 30 centimeter anymore. They're reprocessing it to 15 centimeter. So in an attempt to try and predict what the next headline may be, it might not be counting foot-long subs from space, but perhaps sausage rolls from space. I think, again, this is the kind of stuff that people may read in the paper and then may get misled that you've got a satellite watching you all the time. It's just not the case. But this is the kind of stuff we have to battle with. So all of this chatter that I've had, all this talk about satellite data and what's going on with no satellite data itself. So I think for the last part of my talk, I want to just talk a little bit about images and how they tell a story. And this is quite a telling series of images. It's taken from Nature, but you can see the same on the BBC or various media outlets. And this is nitrogen dioxide measured from Sentinel-5P, which is a free and open satellite from the Sentinel series from the European Space Agency, monitoring the atmospheric pollutants, of various gases. And we can track on just on this image, telling the story of the lockdown in China, and it's the same throughout the world. Italy was particularly stark as well. So satellites are helping us portray stories, and nothing's perhaps more powerful than mapping of disasters or seeing disasters from space. And this is an image created by the excellent Pierre Marcuse using Sentinel Hub. This is of wildfires in California just this year, but I could have equally used an image from the Australia bushfires. The geostationary satellites from there are just incredible, showing the plumes of smoke coming off these huge, vast areas. And it's satellite data here that's being used to convey and help explain to the public the extent of this burn, what's going on, and how it's impacting people over there. It's not just a photo on the ground, which obviously is quite telling, but this is showing the extent. The state of the art in optical data is that we've still got a problem with cloud. Cloud is something that we have to live with, and it's often something that we don't talk about in satellite data because we just assume that's the case. But the latest sort of prototype or small sats that are being projected by ESA, and this is a temporary satellite called FISAT-1. FISAT-2 has also been approved, and this is using onboard AI, whatever that actually means, I'm not sure, but onboard AI to cloud mask before the images are sent down to give you the better quality data, to look and acquire better quality optical data as it comes down. Final image I want to show. This is a time stack of radar images from Sentinel-1. This is synthetic aperture radar, SAR data. This is in Tewkesbury in the UK of sort of February time, where we had a huge amount of rainfall. I think it was the wettest month we've ever had in the UK. If it's black or blue, it's wet. And we can see and track what's going on with on the ground. And I think organisations like the Environmental Agency are using this now to monitor and plan for flood events. The main point here is 5-6 years ago, this would just be impossible for me to do. It would have taken weeks of time, very expensive, but now this is something that everybody here can create in seconds. So data becoming more accessible is a huge trend within Earth observation. And really the final thing I want to say is, and it's almost like a love story, Landsat has changed Earth observation in my lifetime. It's gone from being something I've had to pay for and had to fight for budgets within companies to being free and open. And as soon as they made it free and open, the USGS, the amount of downloads just increased in just incredible exponential curve, and it continues. The only thing really here, the only sad thing here is this is downloading data, and Earth observation now has got a bit smarter to that. We have cloud optimized GeoTIFFs where we can stream data into our geo software or our remote sensing software. And hopefully as years go on, we're going to start accessing the cloud and streaming the bits of imagery in that we need rather than downloading it. But people often try and put a price on the actual return of investment on Landsat and these other satellites, and it always seems to me to be grossly underestimated. It's an incredible resource. So I just think to sort of wrap up and finish is to say, if you're interested in Earth observation, and there's some really brilliant people still to talk, and I'm really excited about hearing them. On the podcast, we try and see and capture what goes on in the news, try and talk to someone within the sector, or me and Alistair just have a chat. I wanted to mention that Alistair is running Raster's Revealed again in January, and he's got a call for papers out at the moment. So if you're interested in attending or putting a paper up for that, please do. But other than that, thanks so much for listening.
Thanks very much, Andrew. We should also mention Alistair will be on the GeoMob podcast very shortly, talking about Raster's Revealed. So, Stephen, any questions?
Yeah. So, a couple of questions for you, Andy.
Yep.
First up, these newish companies that are coming out, appearing in the EO space, are they primarily offering derived information or intelligence, or are they offering more raw data?
Oh, it does depend, but they're trying to offer a whole suite of things. But the winners in this space, digressing from your question, will be the people who go the deepest on the problem.
So that's intelligence rather than just raw data.
Yeah, but there are companies selling raw data. And that still is a big market. There's a pixels and analytics market in its simplest sense.
Right, okay. And if you were, I don't know, you're in the elevator, we're doing the elevator pitch, right? So you've got 60 seconds in the elevator with somebody to get them excited about EO or get them interested in EO. One example that you're going to give them of what EO has, a project that has enabled something fantastic, what would it be?
Wow, I mean, it could be a whole range of things. I mean, I guess the one that just springs to mind is the example that I gave of the counting cars, because this is just something that wasn't even viable a few years ago, and I think this is something that really resonated with me when I started looking at what these companies were doing. So I think the most amazing thing that happened with EO was that when Descartes Labs reported on the health of the expected yields from corn in the US, the market moved by 6%. That was quite a shocking moment, but they soon realized that if they give this information to everybody, then the value of that information is significantly diminished. So I think it is improving. It just depends on on what you want to do with the data, because I could show you loads of images. I could show you automated algorithms for monitoring roads and stuff that companies like Development Seed and Xavier are doing. Or I could talk about, sign a suitcase like ISI are doing. There's so much diversity. But I think where EO sometimes trips over itself is it gets obsessed with the actual satellite images and forgets that it's trying to hit the business problem. And we were sort of paraphrasing what Joe Morrison was saying on our last podcast. He was basically saying, you should be absolutely shocked that you can do this. This is what you should be getting when you're talking about your business problem. So it's saying, you can really map all the dams in Asia. That's what? We don't have to go to the field. What? How do you do that? How do you get all that? It should be that reaction is what I'm trying to hopefully get in my 60-second pitch.
And maybe the final line of that pitch is, and if you really want to know, listen to the scene from above.
Or maybe.